13th, 70 years before they used it again. He had no idea that they were going to use it. But the Anglicans brought it up. And the Anglicans brought up the same argument that some Sedevacantists bring up, that the rite of Vatican II's 1968 Episcopal ordination rite is similar to the Anglican rite. Leo XIII points out, yes, it's similar to the redone Anglican rite, which was redone in around 1800 or something. It is not similar to the rite of Edward II in 1552, whatever Edward number he was, Edward in 1552. That rite is invalid. It took over 150 years before Anglicans looked at the rite and said, oh, our rite's invalid. So they changed it. The Anglicans on their own changed the rite from the Edwardine Ordinal of 1552 to a valid rite, but it was 150 years too late. Because you can read the Pontificale all you want, but you're a layman. Your reading it will not make anybody a priest, because you have to be a priest or a bishop before you can make someone else a bishop. So 150 years, all the valid bishops were dead. There wasn't a single valid bishop in England when some bishop said, uh-oh, our rite is invalid, and then they changed their own rite before Leo XIII said it's invalid. They recognized it. They changed it to a valid form. Leo XIII had recognized, yes, your new form is valid, but it's too late. So the bishops of the church consecrated in the new rite are valid bishops. The priests consecrated in the new ordination rite are valid priests. And remember, you can even tell that. When you see a priest, when you see Father Skippy with shorts and a t-shirt, you know that's Father Skippy. They still have a different way of carrying themselves. They have a different, you'll see in the ordination ceremony tomorrow, Johnny Pfeiffer is going to walk in. Father is going to walk out. It's one of the things you can visibly see. I remember noticing myself in the seminary how my fellow seminarians, like a true seminarian, I didn't like them, but you know, we all fought or whatever. Well, we got along okay. But when they went in, they were just a seminarian, even though they were deacons. They went in, and when they came out, that's Padre. You can physically see the difference. You'll see it tomorrow. You can physically see the difference. And also, like Father Hess pointed out, we all can feel our priesthood. It's something just real. You can feel it. You can sense it. All of our priests have already had multiple miracles of people who were dying, who came back to life from the sacrament of anointing. They've already had deathbed conversions. We've had people come back to the faith, like Father Moses and Father Joseph, ordained by me. They are regularly bringing people back into the faith. And then when you go to the Novus Ordo, the same things are happening in the sense that they have the valid ordination. They have the valid ordination. They are unfortunately doing the wrong thing. They're teaching the errors and heresies of Vatican II. But all they have to do is come back to the true faith, and everything is fixed. But if they're not valid priests and valid bishops, then coming back to the faith doesn't fix anything. Just like for the Pope. If he was an invalid Pope, and he's not the Pope, he can have all the faith he wants. The faith doesn't make him Pope. So these priests, when they celebrate Mass, they can believe in the Mass or they cannot believe in the Mass. They can believe in episcopacy or they cannot believe in episcopacy. It doesn't matter. They are bishops. They are priests. Their faith doesn't make them priests, and their faith doesn't make them bishops. That's why St. Thomas Aquinas says, just as the virtue of faith does not make Christ present, so the loss of faith does not take him away, because faith doesn't make him present. The fact that I'm a valid priest, that I'm a valid bishop, is what makes Christ present. And the Novus Ordo priests and Novus Ordo bishops are valid priests and valid bishops. Their problem is not that they aren't bishops. Their problem is they aren't teaching Christ's teaching. They aren't celebrating the true Mass. Therefore, those are the problems. Not teaching true doctrine, not celebrating the true sacrifice. That's the problem. When they straighten up, everything is fixed. But if they were invalid, like many people claim, some people claim, Their straighten up wouldn't fix anything. So they believe in Jesus, they believe in Blessed Sacrament, but if they're not valid bishops, nothing happens. The fact is, God would never allow his church to collapse like that. There have been many times in the history of the world, Old Testament as well as New Testament, the Arian crisis in the New Testament, and many crises in the Old Testament, where the people of God left the faith. The people of God left the faith, but the faith, the Jews remained the chosen people. The priests offered false sacrifice, but they remained priests. Then when they repented, they came back to the true sacrifice. And they remained the chosen people. And so it is also in the New Testament. There's no issue of the validity of the ordination / consecration of the modern priests and the modern bishops. The issue is the change of faith. Now we come forward to continue the chart we began earlier today, that every person has a free will and has to make a free judgment. So even if this is mommy and she said take out the trash, when mommy said take out the trash, which happens to be dad's Harley, well, I have to decide, does mom have the right to tell me to take out trash? She does. Is it moral to take out the trash? Well, normally it is, but that's dad's Harley Davidson. And to take his Harley Davidson and destroy it will be against God's law. Mom has authority to tell me to take out the trash, but she doesn't have authority to make me go against God's law. So I say, Mom, I'm not going to throw Dad's Harley in the garbage. So even when you're a little child, you have to decide, is that my mom? Does she have the right to tell me to take out the trash? Is taking out the trash a moral act? If it is, I will obey. If I disobey, I commit a sin. If I obey, I'll follow the law of God. Virtue equals to act according to right reason. Hence, the sedevacantist claim, the false claim of sedevacantists is, we sedevacantists have a much simpler path to travel down than you recognize and resist guys. We recognize that since the Pope can't teach false doctrine, well, he's not the Pope. Pope can't teach false doctrine, yes. Okay, Pope can't teach false doctrine, therefore, he's not the Pope. That's why we don't believe in the false doctrine. But however, let's go through their steps. Forget about whether it's right or wrong. What are the steps they have to go through to decide that he's not the Pope? So here we go through the options. Here Vatican II comes, and you're a normal faithful, and you discover that the doctrine with the capital D doesn't match the former doctrine. That is, the ecumenism. All religions are okay. That you don't have to go to Mass on Sundays. You don't need to confess your mortal sins. You don't need confession. That all the Muslims and Jews worship the same God that we worship. So you hear the heresies of Vatican II and the doctrine of the modern priests. It doesn't match the past. That doctrine doesn't match. So what do? Right? So there's option one, the first option. And that is the option of the recognize and resist guys. So here we are. We recognize this doctrine doesn't match. The Pope is telling me to do something different. What do? Just keep on going. Follow the true doctrine and keep going and stand on the doctrine of Christ. Don't follow the new doctrine. And you keep on going until what? One day comes step 3. One day the Pope's going to be teaching the correct doctrine again. We're going to see that doctrine matches the doctrine of Christ that we were taught when we were children. Bang, we go back to obeying the Pope. Remember St. Paul said, if we ourselves or an angel from heaven, which means a bishop, teach you a different gospel than we have already taught you, let him be anathema. Anathema means have nothing to do with him. Doesn't mean he's not a bishop. Doesn't mean he's not a pope. Doesn't mean he's not a priest. Doesn't mean he's not a king. Doesn't mean he's not the mayor. Doesn't mean he's not the daddy. That's someone else's job. But we just go on until that happens. So what are the steps? Sedevacantists claim that the steps of the recognize and resist is very complicated, but it's not. Doctrine doesn't match. New doctrine doesn't match. So what do? I continue. Until the time comes, the doctrine matches. Hence, Archbishop Lefebvre said to the 3 bishops, he consecrated 3 bishops. Well, it became 4. But he wrote a letter to 3 bishops. Later on, Bishop Fillet was added to the list. And he said, I'm going to consecrate you bishops next June 30th, 1988. You will be given a mitre and you'll be given a staff, a crozier. You keep it strong, you keep it up, and you fight the modernism of Rome, and you fight the modernists until the Pope comes back to the faith. Then lay your crozier before his feet. When the Pope comes back to the faith, lay your crozier before his feet. Until then, whack people. Until then, maintain the strong faith. And of course, you'll maintain it afterwards as well, of course. But the Pope is acting against it, so block the harmful blows. That's what we have to do. And then, so that's the recognize and resist, which they say is complicated. What they claim is, the state of Vacantis, you've got to pick and choose. I'm going to obey this. I'm not going to obey that. But the fact is, once you reach the age of reason, when you turn 7 years old, from that moment until you die, you have to pick and choose every day. Are you going to rise up when the bell goes, and the answer is, hell no. But you still have to choose. You have to pick and choose from the moment you get out of bed in the morning to the moment you go to bed at night. And you have to pick and choose every moment of the day. Am I going to go to work? Am I going to obey mommy? Am I going to do what the boss told me to do? Like I mentioned at the end of the last conference, there are many souls who, when they see the false doctrine, they just don't care. Well, the Pope said it was okay. What do I care? Many of those souls are going to be in a place called hell because they don't care. Because they're violating the rules of warfare. Every private knows there's things a general can't tell me to do. And when the general tells you those things, you can't say, well, he told me burn down the village. He told me kill the women and children. I'm just a simple private. I don't know. Maybe they have it coming to them. It's over my pay grade. No, you know that it's against the rules of combat to murder women and children and burn down villages. Therefore, when the commander told you to do that, you have to say no. Those are the rules of a Catholic in warfare. And many people say, hey, it's not my problem. 3 rules. If you are given a command that you know is right, you're obliged to obey it. Rule number 2. If you're given a command that you're not sure is right, you're also obliged to obey it. Doubt goes in favor of the superior. It's only the 3rd case, when you're given a command that you know is wrong, then you're obliged to disobey it. And there's no freedom in any one of those choices. You must obey, and in the 3rd case, you must disobey. So you have to decide in every case. So what are you going to decide? There is a recognize and resist. I'm not going to, he's given me a false doctrine. I will not listen to him until he goes back to give me false, true doctrine again. Now, the state of Vacantis. He starts the same way. This doctrine does not match the previous doctrine. Now, what does that mean? Well, I know that a pope can't teach infallible doctrine. That's the next step, step number 3. Number 1, I saw a false doctrine. Number 2, I know this false doctrine doesn't match. Now I know that a pope can't teach false doctrine. The state of Vacantis decision number 3. Therefore, bam, he's not the pope. And that's why I don't believe the doctrine. State of Vacantis claim, whatever the pope says, you have to believe. The pope says this, that, the other thing. If the pope says something wrong, well, then he's not the pope. How did you decide that? Because you looked at the doctrine. You saw that when the Pope said that Muslims and Catholics worship the same God, that doesn't match what Jesus Christ said. Now, as recognize and resist, that's all you have to do. It doesn't match what Christ said, follow what Christ said. Done. St. Vacantis is at the beginning of his journey. This doesn't follow what Christ said. But I know a pope can't teach something different than what Christ said. But this pope taught something different than what Christ said. Therefore, bam, gone, right? He's not the pope. And that's why I don't believe, I guess we're missing one, and that's why I don't believe what he says. It's pretty complicated. There's a lot of steps. And then, now we got a problem on our hands. He's not the Pope. Now, it just happens that the guy who's not the Pope, say in this case Leo the 14th, he decides to teach true doctrine. Now what? He's not the Pope, but how do I know he's the Pope? Well, he's teaching true doctrine. So I got a non-Pope who decides to teach true doctrine. When I discover the non-Pope is trying to teach true doctrine, now I can make him Pope again. A little beat up, right? But you can be Pope again. Thank you. Okay? Now, forget about whether it's right or wrong. These are the steps. And what does the step mean? It means this man is in charge of that man. Because you decide that he's not Pope. Then you decide the doctrine is okay, and it's sufficient for him to become Pope again. And then you make him Pope again, and now he can tell you what to do, just like a wife. Yes, dear. You know, you are now in charge. Do this. Nope, try again. Right? As long as he gives the command that she wants, he has authority. When he gives command that she doesn't want, he doesn't have authority. So now the Pope is like a husband with a wife. He gets to say he's in charge, and he can make any decision that she agrees with. Otherwise, forget it. But there are many steps here, and you see the problem with the material formal, it's metaphysically impossible. The material cause cannot be the cause of the formal cause. It's metaphysically absolutely impossible. And then with regard to the second problem of choosing, you have more picking and choosing to do as a sedevacantist than you do as a recognize and resist. Recognize, I only judge the doctrine. It's against Christ's doctrine. I continue with Christ's doctrine until such time as the doctrine matches again. I don't make him Pope. I don't make him not Pope. He's still the Pope. God will decide when he wants to remove him. He's the head of the church. But no matter how high a man is, no man has the power and the authority to go against God's law, to teach false doctrine, to guide us away from Christ. And men that are capable of sin will often do that, including the highest man, the Pope. So that we're going to continue until he goes back. The sedevacantist problem starts the same way. There's a false doctrine. Now, what does that mean? Well, a false doctrine taught by a Pope means he's not Pope. And this Pope teaches a false doctrine. Therefore, he's not Pope. Many more steps. And then how do we get him to be back Pope again? Go back to true doctrine. He's back to being Pope again after we see the true doctrine. And then we decide he must be Pope again. In this case, we rule. There's a problem. Those steps don't work. With regard to the mainline sedevacantist position, one last thing here, we'll pack it in for a few minutes. With regard to the mainline sedevacantist position, is that they claim it comes from St. Robert Bellarmine. We're not doing a whole treatise here because we did that last year. This is just a few points. That the mainline position that when the Pope becomes a public sinner, that is, he's a public notorious heretic. Now, the problem with public notorious heretic, and this is pointed out by John of St. Thomas, public sinner is you're an occult sinner until, if you know, for instance, you have a priest who's secretly living with a woman. It's a mortal sin for you to go to the mass of a priest who's living with a woman. However, if it's an occult sin, and only a few people know the priest is living with a woman, it's not a public sin. You can go to that priest's mass. If it becomes a public sin, that is a great number of people, not 100%, not even 51%, but a great number, say 33%, 40%. If a great number, not even a majority, but a great number know that he's living with a woman, then he becomes a public sinner and you can't go to his mass. So a public sinner, and the same thing with the priest. If you are living in mortal sin and you come to me for Holy Communion, I'm obliged to give you Holy Communion. You go to hell for going to Holy Communion because you violate God's law, but I cannot refuse you Holy Communion because you're not a public sinner. That is, only a few people know or no one knows that you are a public sinner. But a sinner. But if it is known to a great number of people that you are a sinner, you come to Holy Communion, I am obliged to refuse you Holy Communion. Those are the rules about public sin. Let's apply that to the Pope. If the Pope is a public heretic, right? So he is a public heretic, right? He's publicly teaching false doctrine. He's publicly teaching false doctrine. Well, public means the people know. Remember, these terms have meanings in canon law, moral theology, and dogmatic theology. Public sinner means a sinner who commits a sin that is known by the people to be guilty of that sin. Do the people, out of the 1.4 billion Catholics, do the 1.4 billion Catholics know that Pope Francis and Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict are teaching heresy? And the simple answer is no. Not even 1%. So that the people don't know that he's teaching heresy. It is not a public, that he's a public heretic. To teach in heresy does not make you a heretic. You have to publicly, maliciously teach the heresy. But even publicly, is he publicly teaching heresy? No. He favors heresy. Many people don't know what his teaching is. His practice is certainly bad. But to be a public heretic, in the definition of public heresy, public sin, in moral theology and the canon law, moral theology, a public sinner is one who is not just a sinner, but who is known to be a sinner by a great number of people. And the great number of people don't know that Leo XIV is a sinner. The great number of people don't know that he's a heretic. The great number of people don't know that he is against God's law and God's teaching. Therefore, he might be a Satanist. He might be. But he does not fulfill the conditions of public sinner. He's not a public sinner. Secretly, maybe he is. Because secretly, anyone can be. So the church is a visible public society. And the church being a visible public society, there's a visible public membership and a visible public departure. St. Barbara Bellarmine talks about it in De Ecclesia Militante, about the church militant, and he says there's a such thing as we call, he calls it visible baptism, which means that you're thought to be baptized. Maybe your mom lied and didn't bring you to the church. Maybe she paid the priest to write the thing in the register and you weren't actually baptized. But you're thought to be baptized. Are you a member of the church? And St. Barbara says, yes, you are. You have visible public baptism. We can't check whether or not the priest was sleeping at the time, whether or not the mom was lying, whether or not you didn't get baptized. It's a visible public society. You are accepted as baptized. You were accepted your first Holy Communion. You were accepted in the seminary. You were ordained a priest. You lived your whole priesthood. There's a famous example in the 1100s of Pope Innocent II, a priest that was not baptized. Sarah Milliman talks about that priest. The priest was not baptized. When the priest died at a young age, his mother finally admitted, I lied. He was never baptized. That meant he was not a valid priest. All his masses were invalid. St. Pope Innocent II wrote concerning that priest was a member of the church. And he is to be given burial rights of the church as a good standing member. He did not know he wasn't baptized. He thought he was baptized. However, also don't worry about his confessions, because whenever anyone went to his confession, they went to another confession afterwards, and the confession's valid. Furthermore, if they died between that confession and another one, God will not hold it against them. There's no worry, nothing to worry about their soul. And he was a true, good standing member of the church. He didn't know he wasn't baptized. He died before they discovered that he was not baptized. He was a member of the visible church. St. Relman says that priest who was not validly baptized was a member of the visible church. He did not have the baptism of desire, because baptism of desire are for those who are not members of the visible church, and they receive it only by desire. He did not have the baptism of desire. He was in the visible church, recognized as a member of the visible church, even as a priest in the visible church, even though it was mistaken. And he died a member of the visible church. It's a visible society. See, R. Bellarmine is a great defender of the visibility of the church against the Protestants who claim the church is invisible. Protestants claim you're not a member of the church unless you have faith. If you don't have faith, you're outside the church. If you do have faith, you're inside the church. That's a heresy of the Protestants. They therefore said the church is invisible. No one can know who is a member of the church because no one can know who really has faith and who doesn't. So the church is visible. And so the same is true of a sinner. He must be a visible sinner to be cast out of the church. Hence, R. Bellarmine says there's two ways to leave the church. You either walk out on your own, become a Protestant, Buddhist, Methodist, whatever, or you are expelled by the authority. It's the only two ways to get out. And even then, of course, you're obviously under the authority of the church and so on. But there's only two ways to get out. So here we have a Pope, Leo XIV now, Francis before him, Benedict XVI before him, all these popes who got elected just like every other pope before them. No difference. They went into a conclave, white smoke came out of a chimney, they walked out, the cardinal said, "You're the pope," stood in front of the same banner, and then they died that way. And the whole world accepted them as popes. The last contested papacy was probably 600 years ago. In the last 600 years, there's been no contested papacy, not even one. They were all accepted as pope, the same as every other pope. There's no difference between how the popes got elected since 1958 and how they were elected before. So they're visible popes. And they're part of a visible society. Their departure would also be visible. There are Catholic bishops who left the Catholic Church and started their own religion. There are Catholic priests who left the Catholic Church, started their own religion, such as Martin Luther, John Calvin. There are Catholic kings who started their own religion, such as Henry VIII. But there was no, it was a visible thing, not a secret. So, in any case, we'll have to close here. But there can't be, any confusion, right, about this. This is not a secret society, the church, and also that to say that the Sedevacantist position is more simple than the "are recognize and resist" is completely false. And also to say that we recognizing resistors have to choose, pick and choose, and they don't, is even much more false, because we only judge concerning doctrine and our actions. They judge concerning the authority, and they condemn the authority and say you are not the authority. That's an infinitely different thing, right? So in any case, we'll close at that. And of course, so any questions or whatever, then we'll pack it in. Right? So that's fine. We can go ahead and say a prayer because it's late here. So the cross that way. Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Saint Vincent Ferrer, Saint Jude, Our Lady of Victory, Our Lady of Sorrows, Our Lady of Help of Christians, Saint Ignatius, and Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Okay, very good. So then at 5:30, I can start up again in a few minutes. Normally I try to have a little discussion afterwards, but 5:30 is going to be Mass, or Rosary Mass. You do say the Rosary during the Mass, also the Mass of the Sacred Heart. And then after that, the solemn dinner. And also here, anyway, I think that's sufficient for now. We're running a little behind the schedule. It was going to be another short conference, but we'll see. Maybe it's been a bit long today, right? You ready to collapse? It's a wise decision. Yes. Okay, we'll go ahead and pack it in, and then 5:30 will be the Rosary / Mass during the Rosary, and then Rosary said during the Mass, in the Mass of the Sacred Heart. And remember, if you receive Holy Communion this morning, you don't receive Holy Communion twice in the same day. But there'll be the Mass at 5:30. It'd be good to attend the Mass and then have what do you call it? Also, about 5:30 or so, maybe /6, Reverend Mr. John and Reverend Mr. Donovan should be arriving here. They were on their retreat in Chicago, and Father Gallagher preached the retreat, but he doesn't like being in the newspapers or the photographs, so he doesn't want to come down here. He helps us out once in a while. But Father Gallagher preached the retreat for them, Father Francis Gallagher, and then so they're coming down from his place in Chicago, and then they'll be here probably 5:30 or 6, and then so they'll be arriving from the retreat. And then so they'll be here, I think about 5:30 or so, plus or minus 5:30 or 6, and then ready for the ordination tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, there is breakfast, but it's just there'll be breakfast for those people because there's about 100 of us staying on the property today. So there's about 75 visitors and about 25 of us that are here, and so about 100 people staying on the property somewhere. And that there will be, a breakfast. If those can come in, you can raid the fridge. And remember, it's 3 hours for Holy Communion, but Mass starts at 11. But and we're going to have the booklets, ordination booklets, and they're also going to have a little video thing. You can turn the page, what page number to be on, And we'll have Vanna White turn the, right? That'll be your job, okay. And so we'll have that, for the ordination, we have the ordination booklets. You get one of those. And then also this year, the air conditioner, I think, is going to work. Last year, we paid money, but we actually didn't pay. We didn't pay half, but we had to pay the first half. We didn't pay the second half because they gave us an air conditioner, which was for psychological purposes only. But this one, I think, we actually turned it on yesterday. It works. So this time we got an air conditioner that works, so it shouldn't be as hot this year as last year for the ordinations. And then also, also appreciate any donations. We'll have a collection during the ordination mass tomorrow and also on Sunday, because obviously it's a big, it's a major event. Many people pull everything together for the event. It's also very important to pull the faithful together, and and so that kind of strengthen the souls for the faith. So, but anyway, so you can stick around. Reverend John and Donovan will be here in the next hour and a half. Mass at 5:30, dinner afterwards. And then tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. is the actual ordination ceremony begins. And then afterwards, we have the banquet afterwards. And then there will be fireworks. Father Cassette got his pyromaniac license. And it just came in a couple days ago. And so he now can buy fireworks at a cheaper rate. Like I said, we never have money for anything, but somehow they come up with money for the fireworks. But now it's become like a tradition, I guess. It's a pretty impressive fireworks show, and he's got that'll be that they're pretty good. He and Father Valentine do a pretty good job with the fireworks. It's also what motivates them all year. Father Valentine, they're always working. They're doing a lot of work, but they live for their pyromaniac show. So, but in any case, that'll be after Compline, and also we have more Compline books. The Compline, of course, at 9 o'clock, and then the tomorrow night fireworks will be after Compline, and then on Sunday the first Mass at 10 a.m. of the future Father John Timothy Pfeiffer. But there already is one Father John Timothy Pfeiffer, who's my brother, and then my little nephew was named after John Timothy Pfeiffer, and now there'll be a second Father John Timothy Pfeiffer. So it's Father John Timothy Pfeiffer number 2. Will be ordained tomorrow. So there'll now be 2 Father John Timothy Pfeiffers. My brother, Father John Timothy, he is in the Philippines. And then the nephew will be ordained tomorrow, Father John Timothy Pfeiffer, number 2. There will be confirmations on Sunday. I'm sorry, confirmations. We got confirmations on Sunday, and Father Midgley is taking the information. Anybody who's confirmed in the Novus Ordo after 1968, it's an invalid confirmation. And the reason is quite simple. It was explained by Pope Leo XIII. If you just say receive the Holy Ghost, it's invalid. That's why the Anglican order was invalid. In the new confirmation rite, the form is receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. But it doesn't say what gift, and it doesn't say anything about the sacrament, which is to make you strengthened or to make you an adult or a soldier. That concept is not anywhere in the form, therefore it's invalid. It could be there in the wimpiest possible manner, but it's got to be there, and it's not. Therefore, the new confirmation confirmation rite is invalid. Anybody confirmed after 1968, they should be reconfirmed again. We just do a conditional. Give your information to Father Midgley, And then we have some new confirmands that are being confirmed also. And so he's going to put all that information together. Confirmation would be right at 10 o'clock, just before the first Mass of Father John Timothy on Sunday, right? So that's good then. Okay. That's it.